Our next poet is Patrice Vecchione. And I first met Patrice many years ago. You don't have to remember, it's okay. It was a lot of years ago at a teachers conference in Monterey. And since then I would hear her name or see it here and there, and most often her name would be accompanied by someone saying, "Oh, I just love her work," or "She's my absolute favorite poet." Very high praise from all quarters. So I'm very happy to welcome Patrice here today. Patrice is the author of Writing and the Spiritual Life, Finding Your Voice by Looking Within, and an earlier collection of poems, Territory of Wind, from Many Hands Press. She's the editor of many anthologies, including Truth and Lies, The Body Eclectic, and Revenge and Forgiveness for young adults from Henry Holt. Whisper and Shout, Poems to Memorize for Children from Cricket Books. I love cricket, excellent. And co-editor of Catholic Girls and Storming Heaven's Gates for Grown-Ups from Penguin. A Woman's Life in Pieces, Patrice's one-woman play, was performed to full houses throughout the Monterey Bay area. For 35 years, she's taught poetry to young people through her program, The Heart of the Word, Poetry and Imagination. A collage artist, her work appears on book covers, including her own book cover that she has for sale here today. She teaches both collage and creative writing workshops at community centers, universities, libraries, and at Esalen Institute in Big Sur. Patrice makes her home in Monterey with her best beloveds, her husband Michael, 2 cats, and a garden often in bloom. And whenever possible, she wanders the trails at Jack's Peak Park, and we're very happy she has wandered here today. Okay. Please help me welcome Patrice Vecchione.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I'm so glad you're
here. Wow, there's a lot of you. I'm glad I happened to show up when Lynn was celebrating her birthday and her beautiful new book. I would like to dedicate my reading this evening to my old friend Kathleen West. Thank you for being here, Kathy. My book is called The Knot Untied. It's a book in 5 sections. The first section is an interlacing, followed by tangle, and then things get really difficult in my Gordian knot, and then the tie that binds, and the last section of the book is The Knot Untied. So I'll read something from each of those sections as well as a new poem. The first quote that begins this book is from a Latin American writer named Clarice Lispector, and she said, "All the world began with a yes." This is called Dispel Fear and Hesitation. The fire alarm of desire, I want to pull it. Drive the engine through town, down back alleys, up billboard boulevards, past yards where laundry waves crisply on the line. With a bullhorn to my lips, I'll proclaim the moment. All the yeses stored up for another day, I'll unleash like dogs. Calling housewives and plumbers, hairdressers and accountants, children with their bouncy balls, railroad men and miners. Flee whatever closed place locks you in. Come out here into the heat of the afternoon. The confetti of peach blossoms and dandelion floats my name next to yours, your name next to hers, igniting desire throughout the town. And this poem is for my just 90-year-old aunt. It's called Cabbage. I think it's the only poem in the English language titled Cabbage. When I come to visit, the first time in several years, my 83-year-old aunt and I drive to the Sarasota market. A hot October evening, days before the hurricane hits. Tomorrow, we'll go swimming. Walking along the vegetable aisle, she pauses, asks, "Would you cook that cabbage dish you made the time you stayed with us back home in Springfield when Graham and I lived in the apartment?" My grandmother's been dead 20 years. The cabbage I cooked in, what, 1976? That must have been during my first vegetable period. Sure, I say. Remind me, was it green cabbage or red? Incredulous, eyebrows raised, my aunt stares at me, stunned I have forgotten. Thank you. I don't know how she could have remembered that. There's a lot of food in my poems because I like to eat. And here's some food I've only had the chance to eat twice in my life. It's called A Sealed Universe. A few days after her husband's funeral, we're invited to the widow's Paris home for lunch. Out of winter's slurry, my lover and I rush in. The table is bare. "Now you are here," she says, buttoning her sweater in the overheated room. She opens the refrigerator. Only a few condiment jars inside and a fat tub sealed with a wide rubber band that requires all her little strength to open. "We'll eat," she exclaims, unwrapping a box of crackers. She makes 2 neat plates for us. White wine is served. Sliding the tub close, the widow spoons shiny beads of black Russian caviar into her mouth. Grief makes us do odd things, doesn't it? And I've been grieving the last 5 days. One of my dearest friends died very suddenly, and I would like to read a poem in honor of my friend Diana. And this poem is called Land of Sorrow. And the person to whom I refer at the beginning of the poem is the poet Pablo Neruda, who wrote an entire book called El Libro de Preguntas, which is the book of questions. There's not an answer anywhere in that book. And yet when I read it, I think I've found the answer to everything. So this is Land of Sorrow. Neruda wondered about unspilled tears, if they might wait in small lakes behind our eyes. Are there fish in those lakes, or swimmers muscling their arms in and out of dark water? It's sorrow I wonder about. How it could go from my life for years, far as a foreign country. To get there, you'd need a boat. Not that you go willingly, not that anything you pack is right either. As a child, when I lived in that country, sadness was daily. Not bad exactly. Some days, sorrow was heavy and smooth. Like a stone, it steadied me. Sadness was someone I didn't have to address as Mr. or Mrs. It may have worn somber clothes, but always had the tiniest fleck of brightness on the brim of its black hat. Even tear-stained, I knew that after sadness, there would be later, even though there was what comes after later. Still, but this sadness, the one I've got today, isn't even dressed. let alone wearing a hat. It's bald as a hatchling before feathers. I believe there is a later. I mean, I know there is. But I'm wiser now. The years of sadness being far as Jupiter may be gone from my life. Thank you. And if you have any applause for any of the rest of the poems, you could save them for the end. My father's 91, and this is called Afternoon with My Father. I'm Italian, in case my name didn't give it away. We're from a little village south of Naples. My father was born in this country, but when he was a young child, his family went back to Naples for a vacation. Afternoon with my father. When my father bends down for some lost thing dropped on the sidewalk, penny, nickel, wristwatch, his reach is easy. You'd never know he's 87. Yesterday, on our way to lunch, something caught his eye. Between his fingers, he held the tiniest scrap of a candy wrapper. 1927, I was 5. We just arrived in Italy. This blue is the exact color of the rattan chairs at the outdoor cafe near Naples, said my father. This blue. Would you like a couple of angry poems? I don't know why I feel feisty tonight. I'd like to read a really angry poem. Maybe I'm angry because I'm sad. Do you ever get angry when you're sad? Yeah. This is called Afternoon on the Avenue. A man looked at us hard-eyed, a sinker. You black-jacketed, me in a short skirt, walking and laughing. What are you? He shouted. A couple of dykes? Turning to where he'd passed us. Fuck you, I yelled at his back, slipping my hand into yours. Had I not been shaken, I'd have had the right word ready. Angry, angry. Okay, I'll do another kind of angry poem, and then that'll be it for angry poems. This is actually a love poem to my mother. Well, that tells you everything now, doesn't it? Maybe I don't have to read the poem now, right? This is the last poem that I wrote for this book, and it gave me the chance to finally say, stop the presses, because the book was already at the printers. It was already on its way to being finished, and I finished this poem, and I was damned if this book was going to come out without this particular piece. And maybe it's sadder than it is angry, I don't know. But then I'll read you the last poems, they'll all be light and happy, sort of. Cast out. Through the coiled cord of the telephone, over a mere handful of separating miles, came the stranger's voice. Your mother was found unconscious in her car. She's in a coma. Come quick. Setting the receiver back in its cradle, the synapses of my 29-year-old brain skidded before coming to a halt. Your mother, the stranger had said, with a delicacy I couldn't place. Mother, I tried emulating, but a tinny sound came out, just an ache. The one who, on an evening 5 years earlier, before dinner was served, flicked her cigarette ash and harshly stated, "I am not your mother." "But you are," was my confused reply. Pushing me out with such finality, the door stitched itself shut so there was nothing to open. Not a door, not a window, not the lid to a single eye. During our 5 lost years, time ground to a shuffle. Her voice, a once upon a time though unsteady lullaby, left the occasional message. "This is Peggy. I am not your mother." And then the line went dead. Until I stood in the too bright room of the flimsy curtains of the 9 fragmented infinite days where, before the burbling death rattle began, before the shut door of her life and my doubled over keening, she pulled herself from the coma, looked into my eyes and said kindly, "You haven't been to dinner lately. How come?" As though I were her daughter, my mother took me back. And we had 4 days together. It's a love poem for my husband. It's called First Kiss. The first time you kissed me, not the hello kiss that for weeks barely grazed my cheek, not the good night kiss you whispered to my forehead on your way out the door, but the one I had to take into my own hands, the kiss I needed to have. When, on our walk through the forest, I stopped, unlaced my boots and stripped, startling you, slipped into the cold springs and shivering, looked up expectantly, you relinquished your jacket and all else, plunged into the cold water and kissed me. Excited to meet, our mouths opened, tongues traded secrets. You tasted of wood smoke and honey. You tasted of my future. And I liked that. Even my feet did. They would have to walk no farther. Thank you. This is another love poem to my husband, a love poem of a different ilk. This is a recent poem. It's called Listening to News of the April Bombings. Cutting leaf and stem from strawberries, making your lunch, husband. Bad news rolls in over the kitchen radio like a storm, troubling me. This is what I've come to do early each weekday morning since the headaches turned me away from my past life and elevated blood pressure took you off salt. The radio's always turned to the news. After a bit of poetry, it's how I start the day, catching glimpses out the window of our spring garden. The news, often bad, is rarely this bad, this close. Ravioli, light and doughy packages from last night's dinner, are covered with more gravy, as if everything were mostly well, and garlic a suitable enough solution for what's not. But the news has rattled me, and fiercely I chop the cabbage and miniature radishes for your salad, wiping at persistent tears, unable to turn away, not reaching for the off switch. Brilliant orange carrot sticks are wrapped in paper, 3 shortbread cookies slipped into an envelope, buttery sweetness for later. You will never eat all this, but I am feeding you deliciousness, as I often do, to sustain you. False protection against sorrow. What else have I? Now the tears come rushing. Uncontrollable, this grief. Too much to wipe away. Too much senselessness I don't know how to hold. Some apple slices, a clutch of almonds. Silly of me, really, trying to keep tears out, trying to lock love in. And I'll do one more poem for you. This is called Sing for Your Supper, and it's a bird poem for you. What if singing were how you earned your living? Each day, year after year, the sky above you is blue. Clouds billow like white dresses. They are yours, though you do not own them. Your voice flickers like a pinwheel of color. Old uncle has his tune, as do your sisters and cousins. Every answer has its question. Songs, little melodies are your job for which you never earn any money. You live in a house in a tree. Rarely do your feet touch the ground. Imagine. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to read to you. You are a marvelous audience.
My name is Gillian Wegener, and I'm the current Poet Laureate of Modesto, California. You've just watched one of the many readings from the Barkin Dog Grill as part of the Second Tuesday Poetry Series. After the Barkin Dog readings, we always have an open mic. Anybody is welcome to come and bring a poem that they have that they're excited about reading, one they've written, even one they haven't written, but one that's meaningful to them. That would be appropriate there as well. So I think our open mics have been pretty successful, and it's always wonderful to hear other people's work. As Poet Laureate, I'm very interested in trying to bring poetry to more elements of our county. I really want to include the whole county and all the 9 cities in it and the outlying areas. And so in doing that, some of the projects that I am working on includes the Stanislaus poem, which would be a collaborative poem written by the people of Stanislaus County. Everybody is invited to write a quatrain, a 4-line poem celebrating their area, whether that is the specific city that they live in or the land around us, the creeks, the waterways, the tributaries, the way the sky looks at dusk in the summer, the orchards, the little animals that live around us, and the people, and all the many, many things that there are going on in our world here that are wonderful. Another project that we've been working on is the New Year's Poetry Challenge. This is a 30-day poetry challenge where I send out a prompt to anybody who's interested, and they write a poem a day for 30 days. Nobody checks up on you. It's not homework. You don't have to send your poem in anywhere. It's just a chance for people to think about poetry during really what's quite a busy time, the holiday season. In addition to that, we are working on putting together the Modesto Poetry Center. I'm really excited about this. I think because there are so many activities going on in our town, and because so many poets are interested and excited, and there are several poetry groups that work together regularly, I think that there's a big case for putting together a poetry center, something like the Sacramento Poetry Center, where we can host readings and lectures that would be, of course, open to the public and hopefully free to everybody. And these lectures might have to do with the flora and fauna of our area. They might have to do with a certain poet. They might have to do with, us writing a certain kind of poem. And various workshops would be great. And I'd love to bring in poets from other areas to share their perspectives with us, since we in Modesto tend to get to know each other pretty well over time. And one thing we really want to do as part of the Poetry Center is to get poetry in the schools, to have many of the retired teachers who are also poets to take their talents into the schools and to bring poetry to a new generation there. We really want to bring poetry to senior centers and to care facilities. As Poet Laureate, I write poems for any occasion the city needs them, and basically we're trying to tie poetry in to as many different aspects of life as we can, both for me as laureate, but also for any poet out there who wants to have a place to share his or her work. Another of the projects that we've been thinking about doing is having a poem a month in the Modesto Bee. And this poem would be, we're still in the planning stages, but the original idea was that the poem would be one that was new to a lot of people, not necessarily written by somebody in our area, maybe important historically or timely to current events, something like that. Another idea that's been floated is to have a poem a month by a local writer and get that into the wider community as well. Finally, we have a lot of people, as I said, who are working on this in various ways. We have one poet who's working to the senior centers, another poet who's very interested in giving lectures, and we have another poet, former Poet Laureate here in Modesto, Ed Bearden, who has put together a Modesto Poetry Festival this year. That'll be in February, and hopefully that will continue and be an annual event. A Modesto Poetry Walk, which will be modeled on the Petaluma Poetry Walk that happens every year in the fall. And this is an event where there are several venues, and at each venue a poet reads their work, and the audience listens, of course, but also has a chance to have coffee and hang out, and then go on to, after the reading, another venue where they may hear another poet or another writer, and get the chance to be there together, and then go to yet a third venue. And at each venue there would be a poet reading their work, sharing their ideas, and hopefully inspiring people to write their poetry as well. So what can you do if you want to get involved in poetry here in Modesto? Well, it's easy. All you have to do is email me at wegenerspage@yahoo.com. and I will put you on our email contact list. This will enable you to be on the list to receive an email periodically that has readings and that has events, submissions, news. Any news pertaining to poetry is on this. In addition to that, you'll hear more about the Modesto Poetry Center, any plans that are going on, and you are welcome to get involved in that as well. We look forward to meeting you, and thank you for your interest in poetry.